But it's not as if you want to get rid of any and all complete bureaucracy. Like, bureaucracy is just going to be innate in an organizational structure. You try to reduce it, of course, but also you do need checks and balances put in place, because otherwise, yes, fucked up shit can happen. And if we're dealing with something that directly relates to how millions of human beings may be getting life-saving and essential medicines, then yeah, we can't always fuck around and be like, you know, well, let's just hope for the best kind of situation. I'm just going to quickly talk about this for 2 seconds, because it seems to be the discourse that's going on right now around the world. And I'm going to skip over looking at the Destiny version of it. But how did this discussion begin? There's no global unifier, no name to unite under. Even capitalism could not unify us against the capitalist, this proletariat. What is unifying is the horizon of each and every unique rejection of how we are forced to live, not totalized in machine, but in global it is locality. Any communism worth fighting for is one that no longer separates how we live from our political actions. Freedom can't be born through managerial, bureaucratic practices, but only through practicing freedom itself against those very bureaucratic practices. What does this mean? How do you manage large supply chains without bureaucracy? So this little unknown account threw in such a wedge, and this is what this, you can see the origins right here between this, and this is where it begins. This is the beauty here. Why would I want to manage large supply chain? To manufacture medication or generally leverage comparative advantages to produce surplus to lower the required labor hours. That sounds boring and exploitative and like something I'd have more fun blowing up. This is literally how all specialization works. How would you produce medicine? Make a few friends with a chemistry degree. Buy some lab equipment from one of the thousands of lab equipment suppliers. Learn chemistry or pick up a medicine book from a local library. Talk to rural doctors and healers who are already doing this now out of necessity. Okay, so now I'm caught up. Now I understand the discourse. So chemists, to make things, they need chemicals. That's going to be a big flaw in this plan. And unfortunately, we do live in an interconnected global world right now, of which there is a large amount of people, I would say millions upon millions of people that may require life-saving medication that is unfortunately at this point produced under a system that we have that has supply lines, supply chains, and it's not as simple as simply saying, hey, go find yourself a chemist and get them to make you the sweet. The reason being that, like, I know this is kind of a Breaking Bad style version of this, but there's a lot that goes into making medication, and a lot of it requires maybe precursors and some chemicals that you will not have access to or the ability to synthesize just from raw organic materials. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a big problem in the West. Maybe I should do my asterisks here. There's a big problem in the West in general with this kind of concept of, people should be completely reliant on pharmaceutical corporations and their products and the overprescription of those products, and people being advertised to by those companies and those corporations and being told that your life is not going to be good and or satisfying unless you're taking X every day. And if you take X every day, then it's going to make all of your troubles go away and you're going to feel wonderful, except for the side effect being diarrhea. But once you get over that diarrhea, X is going to make you feel wonderful. So why don't you take X? Bye. You're not happy yet. You will be. Bye. Yes, that is an entire reality. There's also people who happen to be schizophrenic. There's also people who happen to be bipolar. There's also people who happen to be diabetic who will need, in one way or another, prescription medications or insulin or stuff like that in order to help themselves. And as of now, the ability for someone to synthesize or make those things out of based raw materials just in their own home, we don't really live in that world. So I think if one of the problems people have is bureaucracy, but that is kind of a nebulous term too for people to be just mad at bureaucracy itself. Bureaucracy is going to kind of take place depending on how you have a socially organized structure. There's going to be red tape, there's going to be checks and balances, there's going to be procedures and stuff. I mean, it gets a little closer to that kind of like Dave Rubin side of things if we're going into, like, why don't we just I know people are saying ANCAP and people are saying this and that. I don't think at the end of the day, I am not someone who's going to sit here and tell you that I have worked out in my mind the best and possible leftist perspective or socialist perspective in order to fix all the problems with supply chains. It's something that I'm trying to learn more about. I can tell you from friends, because I am not a chemist myself, but I can tell you from friends who are quite more adept in chemistry than I am, and I'm also just a cheerleader when it comes to science and stuff like that, that, it's one thing for you to say, hey, I grow my own medicine at home. I grow cannabis. I happen to have glaucoma. It's been scientifically proven that marijuana does regulate eye ocular pressure. So by smoking cannabis, it helps my glaucoma, and there you have it. You have someone who produces the medicine they need in their house. They get their medicine, and then they grow it, they take it, they consume it, and then they feel better afterwards. There's a pretty good example of that. Just growing weed by itself, it's not simply as easy, especially indoors or hydroponically, as people might think, just off the basis. I mean, I know it is called weed, and it does grow, and it's very resilient, and it actually grows very well without pesticides, and there's all these possible, you can get into the hippie why everyone should grow hemp to save us. All that kind of stuff. There's still a lot of know-how, okay? You need to know how to detect whether or not a plant is going to be a male or a female plant. Why is that important? Because only one of the two is going to have buds. Buds are where all the THC is going to be. So you need to be able to locate immediately if this is going to grow up to be a female plant. If it's not, it's going to be a male plant, and it's just going to try and inseminate the rest of your female plants, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of weed that has a whole bunch of seeds and stuff in it, in Roblox, of course. So what you got to do is you got to be able to isolate and pick out the female plants, and then you have to know how to trim them properly, because if you don't, they're not going to grow in the right direction. Anyways, it's not as simple as just like I plant a seed and I get my medicines, right? But that is, in essence, probably one of the quickest and fastest one-to-one, ways of explaining the idea of people making their own medicines at home. When it comes to far more complex stuff that requires a chemical process, you will most likely need precursors in order to make little things you may need. And I'm not even going to start for half a second to try and pretend that I know how to make anything in a chemistry lab that is not going to explode in my face. I do not. And even if I did have friends who were chemists, because that used to be the old adage back when I was in university, it used to be like, hey, you should get a friend who's a chemist. This was pre-Breaking Bad days, but be like, because they can make you anything you want, baby. Yeah, they can synthesize you some Molly, some Polly, some Jolly. I don't know what the kids are having these days, but just find yourself a little friend who's a chemist. And yeah, they probably could make a lot of wild things, but they're also going to need precursors to make those things, which are most likely going to depend on these supply lines that we have. So the immediate solution, if we're trying to work towards a less exploitative, less capitalistic world, but we still do have, again, millions of people who depend on getting sometimes life-saving medications, is not to simply blow up or destroy all of the supply chains that currently exist in some kind of, I don't know, rebellious way. And in that process, like, it seems very like punk to act that way. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think it puts into account or puts us into the headspace of like there are a lot of people who depend on that just to be able to get through their life, kind of stuff. There's a good thread on this by Vaush. I just gave you an amazing thread. All right, Kubi. I don't need Vaush's opinion on this. Okay, I have done it. I did it on my own. I didn't have an outside source. I did a great job, and I did that as someone who has no experience in chemistry. You just have to rewind the VOD. Well, yes, I'm an anarchist who recognizes the fact that the moral necessity of destroying the hierarchical systems and flattering power must be balanced with preserving industrial and logistical advancements which help the people efficiently meet their own needs. How could you tell? Like, here's the thing. When people are saying, and they use the term anarchism, and I'm not in any way trying to say that Doe doesn't know this. Doe knows infinitely. Doe is so well read. It knows so much about a whole host of like different anarchist thinkers, different philosophers, different theorists. I'm not trying to talk about that. I'm talking about other people who might not be understanding when we talk about anarchism. Anarchism, and it's the quickest Cole's Notes raw form I can explain it to you, is that the burden of proof for the justification of a hierarchy lies upon those who have a hierarchical position. So in the case of the manufacturers, those who manufacture raw materials that are then turned into prescription drugs, the onus would be on them to justify their hierarchy of having the ability to do that and the ability to do so in a way in which they can undercut the competition, have monopolies. All that is going to be, the onus is going to be on them. That's what the anarchist perspective on this is. I think people are trying to combine a whole bunch of different things at once, and they're trying to do this thing where they're like, yes, but how does this explain supply chains? And anarchists technically want to blow up trains and blow up supply chains, so they're probably going to want, and it's like, no, that's not anarchism. You're thinking of Joker. That's what you're thinking of right now. Why are so-called anarchists on the site making the same positive, negative liberty mistakes as right libertarians? Strong economic forces have the ability to free us from natural hierarchies and inequalities, like, say, the suffering of people with disabilities or illness. If you want medicine, education, advanced scientific attainment, and the production of localized cells for bigotry, you need bureaucracies and centers of power. If you don't, you're denying humans the tools we built to give people a chance to give. Well, I mean, it's like how... Even in purely anarchist, modern, like the Zapatistas, for example, it's not as if the Zapatistas, and if you look at the way they organize in their structures, it's not as if they exist without any kind of bodies, as in there's no bureaucracy whatsoever, there's no organizations. There's just a justification for those hierarchies on a repeated basis. So if someone is in charge or leader, and the same thing works for worker cooperatives, by the way, with the Mondragon Corporation, it's not as if there isn't CEOs in the sense that, like, there isn't managers, there isn't people, there isn't like these companies work, and they work very well because they work with structures. There are certain organizational principles that you just get by having millions or billions of human beings on a planet who want to work collectively together. That means that you need to organize yourselves in a certain way. In the case of Mondragon, unlike traditional corporations where people make 365 to sometimes 1,000 plus times what their workers make, the CEOs only make between 3 to 8 times what their workers make, and they take that on as yes, I'm someone who enjoys having higher responsibility, higher stakes, higher gravity should I fuck up, so I want to be in a managerial position. Okay, do you get to stay in that managerial position forever? Like, do you always get to be in that managerial position? The answer to that would be, well, no one should, because that's where you can lead to corruption. And people who only have absolute control in a system and a hierarchy are going to want to continue to concentrate that power and control to themselves and to their peers. That's the problem that we have with our current system, the way it's organized. So you have more equitable systems where everyone has a say, such as a worker cooperative. All of the employees also have the ability to vote and or choose who they want to have organizing around them. That's what changes the dynamic of that. But it's not as if you want to get rid of any and all complete bureaucracy. Like, bureaucracy is just going to be innate in an organizational structure. You try to reduce it, of course, but also you do need checks and balances put in place, because otherwise, yes, fucked up shit can happen. And if we're dealing with something that directly relates to how millions of human beings may be getting life-saving and essential medicines, then yeah, we can't always fuck around and be like, well, let's just hope for the best kind of situation. Making the argument that freedom from bureaucracy and systems will control and inherently maximize freedom, no matter how efficient and subject to natural inequality it makes us, is a dumb libertarian saying the lack of government regulation will... Yeah, it's like, that's one... I kind of agree with Vaush here. It feels like you're getting a little bit too close to libertarianism. Can I also add, by the way, I'm not trying to come down exclusively on Demon Mama. I think Demon Mama had a bad take, hadn't fought it through, and just has been doubling down, kind of. Like, leaving this one up, obviously, to complete ridicule. But then I saw the Demon Mama put a whole... She wrote a whole bunch more tweets about how, this was part of a much broader concept and discussion on her Twitter account, where she's like, about, here's all the problems with our medical system, of which the problems with the medical system in the US are immense. There's so many things you can call out and criticize, and as you should, especially because, yes, there is a very big problem with private insurance companies as well as personal and profit being the primary motivator and the primary agent behind which the entire system is structured. That is fucked up. Yes, that needs to be corrected, dismantled, whatever you want to say. The answer to that is not a completely unhierarchical, unorganized, unbureaucratic alternative to something that, again, requires crucial supply lines for people to be able to manufacture and mass distribute life-saving medications. That's not what I'm advocating for. What I want to do is I want to take out... I think we as a society can all kind of collectively come together and agree that there are certain things where if the entire driving motivator behind it is the profit motive, that it has negative consequential effects on society broadly, and that includes health. If public health, the discovery, manufacture, invention of things like pharmaceutical drugs, the production therein, or of any kind of life-saving medication that is necessary, such as insulin, for example, you get yourself into a really fucked up situation in society. And I mean, Canada's better than the US by a huge margin on this, but they're still imperfect. Both of them are. There's still a problem where there are situations in which people cannot afford the prescription drugs that they need in order to survive. That should not exist. That should not be something that people have to think about. They shouldn't have to think about whether or not I will be able to pay my rent or buy my medication. That is, there's just no way to have a healthy functioning society if there is any percentage of that society that has to deal with that, let alone huge percentages of society, let alone huge amounts of society worrying about that kind of thing. We are so wealthy while at the same time so simultaneously poor when it comes to income, disparity in these countries. We can afford to house all of our citizens in these nations that boast about being the greatest countries on earth, that boast about being the richest. We can afford to give a quality of life to all our citizens. We can afford to give a certain amount of food to all of our citizens. That is also true. We have the resources to do that. We just do not have the organization to do that. So the way in which we organize society is dramatically fucked up. And so that's what needs to change, not the abolishment of society itself. That would be where there's a huge conflict between the two. Does that kind of answer your question as to what my thoughts were on this? I like Demo Mulatto. She can be spicier than Vaush sometimes. Hey, I mean, we can all have, like I said, I've made and/or had a number of terrible bad takes. I will have made and/or had them by the end of the stream, most likely. If anyone professionally streams for a living and talks for hours on end, they're most likely going to have and/or make some pretty shitty bad takes. And yeah, I think what is really important in terms of focusing people's attention right now is making them self-aware of a lot of these things, because you are constantly like, right now is a crucial time for this. Right now, everyone I'm sure is noticing gasoline and food in the past month have both gone bree, as in both are very, very expensive. Now, when it came to supply lines, this has been a problem for a while. We've been talking to this for a while, but we had an expert who was interviewed on Jon Stewart's show, and they were talking to them, and they were like, is it simply the case that a lot of these companies that have monopolies over these industries, there's only a few companies that produce and sell all of the milk in America, that sell all of the meat in America? There's like an actual meat mafia. There's a very small amount of people who dictate and control the amount of meat that is sold to all Americans. Is it the case that they just every now and then say, why don't we make more money and just increase the price, but without justifying it? And she was like, well, that's actually entirely the case. It sounds like it's way too simple. It sounds like way too simplistic, that people are just like, oh, I'm going to make more money now and just charge you all more. But that's kind of the case. And right now with the gas, the same thing is happening. I'm not saying that there isn't a whole bunch of world conflicts. There is. I mean, we're very well aware of them. I live in British Columbia. British Columbia does not get its oil from Russia. It does not get its natural gas from Russia. We get a lot of our resources. We get the bitumen is extracted in Alberta, and then it has to be taken somewhere to be processed into crude, and then it is distributed to British Columbia. But that really is what should be affecting our direct at the price gas pump price. That's not a real sentence, but I said it anyway. But still, the price in British Columbia just went through the roof as well, because people have decided, hey, well, I can make a lot more money right now, so I'm just going to turn up that nozzle. And we don't really question it. We kind of just sit back and have to buy into this whole, like, well, this is kind of are you part of the effort here? I mean, do you support Ukraine? Do you support efforts to block Russia? Russia oil bad, Russia bad evil, Saudi Arabia oil good for some reason, so don't worry about that one. But either way, don't think too hard about this, but you're on board, right? We're all on the same team. We're all, team justice, I guess, and because of that, you're willing to pay a little bit more. I mean, even the president, Joe Biden himself, has come out and said that, like, Americans, you're willing to just sacrifice a little bit at the pump. I know we've asked you to sacrifice so much for so long, but you can just sacrifice a little bit more, pay a little bit more money at the pump. Hopefully you're not an Uber driver right now, because if you are, damn, your margins just got razor thin, and they were already very thin to begin with, but hopefully that's not the case. And then, yeah. Oh yeah, and on top of which, Saudi Arabia just executed the largest amount of people, I believe, in their modern history. 81 people in a single day. Public executions. Yeah. Dude, like, can you imagine if Russia was doing that? I mean, I know I'm going to show you some scary footage of Russia locking people up for saying no war, but if Russia was executing 81 people publicly in a single day, we would be like, whoa, look at this evil, backwards country. How could they do such things? Oh, my word. Oh, 85 people. Sorry, my mistake. 85. All right.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we beseech thee to smite down our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble court jesters, here to amuse you. To our lords, Trevor R., we give thanks for this spit of land for us to eke out this meager existence. To our knights, Merid, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Ellie Leslie, Alex P., Brandon, Words Greenwood, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Val 9000, Jenna Tall, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Yanis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our flag in a veil, and we salute you, our friends.